I never imagined that a single sentence could destroy me, but that night, it did. My daughter, my only daughter, the very reason I lived, the little girl whose hands once clung to mine, looked me straight in the eye and said words I will never forget. "You're not invited to my wedding." Do you understand the kind of pain that brings? It isn't just rejection. It isn't just humiliation. It is the kind of wound that pierces through your soul, leaving scars you can never fully heal from. I stood there, frozen, my heart pounding so loudly I could hear it echo inside my ears. I opened my mouth to speak, to ask her why, but nothing came out. My throat tightened, my breath caught in my chest, and I realized I was standing on the edge of a nightmare I could not wake up from. This was supposed to be the happiest time of our lives, a wedding, a celebration, a moment where families come together, where laughter and blessings fill the air. I had dreamed of this day from the moment she was born. I thought I'd stand by her side, adjust her veil, kiss her forehead, and whisper, "You look beautiful, my darling." But instead, she had erased me. With one sentence, she had torn me out of her life's most important chapter. My legs shook. My hands trembled. The walls around me seemed to close in. In that moment, I was not a mother anymore. I was a stranger, an unwanted guest in the very life I had built for her. I wanted to scream. I wanted to fall to my knees and beg her to tell me it was a mistake. But I couldn't, because when I looked into her eyes, I saw something that shattered me more than her words: coldness, a silence that spoke louder than anything else. It was as if my love, my sacrifices, my sleepless nights, my prayers, all of it meant nothing. But here's what you don't know. This story doesn't end with my daughter's rejection. No. This is not just about a mother being left behind. This is about betrayal, secrets, and a truth so heavy it threatened to crush everything we once were. Because when she told me I wasn't invited, I didn't just accept it. I made a decision, one that shocked the entire family, one that left my daughter pale and trembling, one that changed everything. So stay with me, because by the time you hear the end of this story, you will understand why I walked away, why we canceled everything, and why, despite the pain, I found a strength I didn't know I still had. This isn't just a story of a wedding gone wrong. It's the story of a mother's heart, broken but unbowed. And before this is over, the truth behind my daughter's words will be revealed. A truth that may leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about family, loyalty, and love. They say a mother's love is unconditional, limitless, and eternal. And for most of my life, that was all I ever believed in, because of her, my daughter. From the moment she entered this world, my world shifted. I still remember that night vividly. The storm outside, the hospital lights too bright, the pain unbearable, and then her cry. Oh, that cry. It was like a song, pulling me out of my suffering, reminding me that the struggle was worth it. When the nurse placed her tiny body into my arms, I looked down and whispered, "You're my everything now." And she was. I raised her almost entirely on my own. My husband, God bless him, worked long hours to keep food on our table and a roof over our heads, but the day-to-day was mine. Sleepless nights when she was sick, endless mornings rushing to get her ready for school, sacrificing small dreams, new clothes, vacations, hobbies, because her needs always came first. I remember the winters most of all. Our house was drafty, and the heater never seemed strong enough. I would wrap her in 2 blankets, then lie awake blowing warm breath into my hands so I could rub her little fingers and keep them from freezing. I went without meals sometimes so she could have her favorite dish. I patched my old coat year after year so she could walk into class with new shoes. And yet, those were the happiest years of my life because she smiled at me, because she'd run into my arms after school, because every night before bed, she'd press her cheek against mine and whisper, "Good night, Mama. I love you the most." Her laughter was my medicine. Her happiness was my pride. And her future, that was my mission. We didn't have luxuries, but I tried to make her life feel magical. On Eid, I stayed up all night sewing her dress by hand so she could twirl around the next day with a smile brighter than the sun. When she wanted a toy I couldn't afford, I found ways to make her one with scraps, and her giggles told me she didn't notice the difference. I worked extra shifts, cleaned houses, stitched clothes for neighbors, anything I could do. Every rupee, every penny, every scrap of savings I tucked away was not for me, but for her education, for her dreams, for the life she deserved to live. I told myself, one day she'll look back and see what I did for her. One day she'll thank me. And in many ways, she did, at least in the beginning.
When she was little, she would scribble drawings of us holding hands under rainbows. She'd bring them to me proudly, saying, "Mama, it's just us against the world." And my heart would swell because I believed her. I believed we were a team, bound by love, unbreakable. On rainy evenings, we sat by the window sharing a single cup of chai because I couldn't afford to. She would dip biscuits into it, giggling as they crumbled, and then rest her head on my shoulder. "When I grow up, Mama, I'll buy you a big house," she once promised, "with a heater that never breaks." I laughed, but deep down, I held on to that promise like a treasure. There were times she made me feel like the richest woman alive. Like the day she won a small school competition, and when given a chance to thank someone, she said, "I thank my mama because she is my everything." I cried the whole way home. Our life wasn't easy, but it was filled with moments that still glow in my memory. The late-night storytelling sessions where she insisted I act out every character with silly voices. The time she climbed into my lap when she was scared of thunder, whispering, "Don't let go, Mama." Her habit of sneaking into my bed on cold nights, her little feet icy against mine, but her presence warm enough to melt away my worries. She was my shadow, my purpose, my reason to fight through every hardship. But as time went on, I began to notice changes. First, small things. She grew embarrassed when I tried to hold her hand in public. She didn't want me waiting at the school gate anymore. She would walk home with friends, Mama, her voice sharp, though her eyes looked away. It hurt, but I told myself it was normal. Children grow. They want independence. Then came the teenage years, and with them, sharper words, rolling eyes, sighs heavy with impatience whenever I asked her about her day. Sometimes she would shut herself in her room, and I would sit outside her door listening to music leaking through the cracks, praying she'd open up to me again. One night, I stayed up with her favorite curry simmering on the stove, waiting to share dinner. She came home late, eyes on her phone, and walked straight past me to her room. The curry went cold, and I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, whispering a prayer. "Ya Allah, don't let her drift too far from me." And yet, even as the cracks appeared, there were moments of closeness. A soft hug after a fight, a whispered, "Sorry, Mama," when she knew she'd hurt me. A smile that reminded me of the little girl who once clung to my sorry and refused to let go. I clung to those glimpses, telling myself it was just a phase. Once she grew older, she would understand. She would see the sacrifices I made. She would come back to me, because how could she not? I had given her everything. That's why the wedding meant so much to me. It wasn't just a ceremony. It wasn't just a day of celebration. To me, it was proof that everything I had endured, everything I had sacrificed, had been worth it. I dreamed of helping her choose her dress, pinning her veil, seeing her glow as she walked down the aisle. I wanted to give her the blessings only a mother can give. To stand tall in front of the world and say, "This is my daughter. This is the life I built for her." It wasn't just her wedding. It was my victory, too. But sometimes, dreams have shadows. I noticed her avoiding my gaze when I asked about preparations, the way she changed the subject when I asked what role I could play. Once, I offered her money I had quietly saved for years, but she brushed it aside with a distracted, "We'll see, Mama." Little things, yes, but mothers notice. We always notice. The bond that had once been just us against the world began to feel fragile, like a thread being pulled one tug at a time. I told myself she was busy, stressed, overwhelmed, that her silence meant nothing, that her distance was temporary. But late at night, when the house was quiet, I felt it. The cold, gnawing whisper of fear. What if I'm losing her? Now, as I sit here recalling it all, I wonder, maybe the betrayal didn't come suddenly. Maybe it was years in the making, slowly chipping away at the bond we once had. Maybe I saw the signs, but refused to face them. Because how could I? She was my daughter, my heart, my everything. To imagine her turning away from me was to imagine the sun refusing to rise. Impossible. Unthinkable. And yet, it happened. Raising her wasn't just my duty. It was my identity. She was the reason I endured, the reason I survived. And when she pushed me out of her life's most precious moment, it wasn't just rejection. It was as if she had erased my existence. But before we reached that moment, before we reached those cruel words that cut deeper than any knife, you must understand the love that came first. Because only when you see how much a mother gives, can you truly understand the devastation when that same child says, "You're not invited."
If there's one thing a mother dreams of from the moment she holds her daughter, it's her wedding day. I used to imagine it when she was barely old enough to walk, her tiny hands clutching my sari, her curls bouncing as she toddled around the house. I would smile and whisper to myself, "One day I'll watch her walk down the aisle. One day I'll see her radiant, dressed as a bride." That dream stayed alive through every hardship. On nights when I went hungry so she could eat, I comforted myself with the thought that one day I'd see her glowing with happiness, surrounded by love, and I would know my sacrifices had been worth it. So when the time finally came, when she told me she was getting married, it felt like the heavens had opened. My heart leapt, my hands trembled with joy, and tears spilled before I could stop them. I wanted everything to be perfect for her. I began saving every little bit I could. I opened the small wooden box hidden at the back of my cupboard, the one where I had tucked away money for years, notes folded so tightly they smelled of time itself.
Some of that money was meant for my old age, but I didn't hesitate. What use was comfort for me if it couldn't be used to light up her life? I made lists, long lists of what we would need. The dress, the jewelry, the decorations, the food. I could already see it all. The lights shimmering like stars, the fragrance of roses filling the hall, the sound of music as families clapped and danced. I could almost hear her laughter, see her cheeks flush with joy. I even started preparing little things myself. I embroidered handkerchiefs, stitched pillow covers, and gathered keepsakes I thought she might cherish in her new home. Every stitch was filled with prayer, every thread woven with love. One day, I took out the silk fabric I had been saving for years. It was pale gold, soft as a whisper, brought from my own wedding chest. My plan was to have it tailored into a shawl for her, to drape around her shoulders on her wedding night as a blessing passed from one generation to the next. And I began preparing my own dress, too. Nothing too grand, but respectable. A soft pastel sari, embroidered with delicate beads I stitched on myself in the quiet of the evenings. I wanted to look dignified, to stand beside her proudly, not as a burdened old woman, but as the mother of the bride. Every coin I spent felt like an offering. Every plan I made was another way of saying, "You matter more than anything." And yet, as the preparations grew, so did something else. A feeling, a shadow. It began subtly, a hesitation in her voice when I asked about the wedding details, a flicker in her eyes when I spoke about traditions I dreamed of including. Sometimes she'd smile politely, nodding, but then quickly change the subject. At first, I thought nothing of it. She was overwhelmed, perhaps. Planning a wedding is no small task. I told myself she was stressed, preoccupied. But then there were the whispers. Her fiancé's family. They were different, wealthier, prouder. They carried themselves with an air of superiority, the kind that makes people like me feel smaller in their presence. When I offered suggestions about the ceremony, they exchanged looks I couldn't quite read. Smiles, too sharp, too thin. Once, at a family gathering, I heard one of them laugh softly and murmur, "She's too simple, too old-fashioned." They didn't think I heard, but I did, and the words stung deeper than they should have. I tried to ignore it. I tried to keep smiling. After all, wasn't this her moment? Didn't she deserve joy without the weight of my insecurities? Still, a mother notices things. I noticed how my daughter began to spend more time with them, less with me. I noticed how sometimes she avoided introducing me proudly, as if she were embarrassed by my worn hands and simple clothes. Once, when I mentioned helping with the guest list, she quickly said, "Don't worry, Mama, it's being handled." Her tone was gentle, but it carried a finality that closed the door on me. It hurt, but I told myself it was temporary. Surely, when the wedding day came, she would need me. Surely she would turn to me with those eyes I'd known since she was a baby, full of trust and love. I buried my unease under excitement. I forced myself to keep planning, keep saving, keep hoping. I imagined myself walking into the wedding hall, guests turning their heads to see me, whispering, "That's the bride's mother. Look how proud she looks." I dreamed of adjusting her veil, of holding her trembling hand before she walked towards her future. I told myself that no matter what tension I sensed, no matter what shadows crept in, nothing could take away that moment from me. But deep down, a voice kept whispering, "Something isn't right." It was like preparing for a festival under a sky already rumbling with distant thunder. You try to enjoy the light, the laughter, the colors, but you cannot ignore the heaviness in the air. And though I didn't know it then, all my preparations, all my sleepless nights, all my sacrifices were not leading me toward the day I had dreamed of. They were leading me toward the greatest heartbreak of my life. Because while I was stitching beads onto my sari, while I was wrapping gifts with love, while I was pouring every last bit of my soul into that wedding, my daughter was preparing something else entirely. Something that would tear apart not just the ceremony, but the bond between us. But that is a truth I will come to. For now, all I can tell you is this. I entered the wedding preparations with joy in my heart, blind to the storm gathering around me. And soon, that storm would strike with a force I never expected. The day it happened, the sun was dipping low, painting the sky with streaks of orange and red. I had spent the afternoon sorting through boxes of gifts I had wrapped myself, kitchen sets, linens, little things I thought she might need in her new home. I was humming quietly, almost childishly excited, when the phone call came. Her voice was calm, too calm. "Mama, can you come over? There's something we need to talk about." I didn't hesitate. I gathered my shawl around me and told her father she must need advice. Maybe she's nervous about the wedding. My husband nodded, his face glowing with pride. Neither of us suspected what awaited us. When we arrived at her fiancé's house, the air felt different, heavy. The kind of silence that wraps itself around you and whispers warnings you can't quite hear. She was standing in the living room, her arms crossed, her eyes fixed on the floor. Her fiancé lingered by the doorway, his family hovering just behind him, their expressions unreadable. I stepped forward, my heart swelling at the sight of her. She looked so grown, so beautiful, even in her simple clothes. For a moment, I thought I saw my little girl, the one who used to run to me with scraped knees, begging for comfort. But then she looked up. Her eyes were not the eyes of my child. They were cold, distant, as if a wall had been built between us. "Sit down, Mama. Papa." We sat, though my heart was already racing. I clutched my husband's hand tightly, his knuckles turned white under my grip. She took a breath, her lips trembling slightly before pressing together in a thin, firm line. Her fiancé's family exchanged quick glances, like silent signals being passed across a battlefield. And then she said it. "Mama, Papa, you're not invited to my wedding." For a moment I didn't hear it. Or maybe I did, but my mind refused to understand. The words hung in the air, heavy, impossible. My ears rang, my chest tightened. I blinked at her, waiting for her to laugh, to say it was some kind of cruel joke. But she didn't laugh. My mouth opened, but no sound came out. I felt my throat close up, as though the very air had turned to stone. My husband stiffened beside me, his face pale, his lips trembling. He whispered, "Daughter, do you understand what you're saying? This is your wedding, your own mother, your own father. How can we not be there?" She closed her eyes just for a moment. When she opened them again, they glistened with something that looked almost like pain. But it vanished quickly, replaced with icy resolve. "I've made my decision." Silence filled the room. Not the comfortable silence of family,
but the kind that suffocates, that crushes every word left unsaid.
My husband bowed his head, his shoulders slumping. I had never seen him so broken. He was a man who endured years of hard labor, who weathered storms and losses without shedding a tear. But in that moment, his eyes filled and his breath shuddered. I reached out toward her, my hand shaking. "Do you remember, my child? Do you remember the winters I kept you warm in my arms? The nights I went hungry so you could eat? Do you remember the lullabies I sang until you fell asleep?" Her jaw tightened, her lips pressed into a line. She looked away. That hurt more than anything. Not the words, not the rejection, but the way she couldn't even meet my eyes, as if I were something shameful, something to be hidden away. Around us, the fiancé's family shifted uncomfortably. One of them whispered, "It's better this way. We don't want unnecessary scenes at the ceremony." Unnecessary scenes? That's what I was to them, an unwanted presence, a stain on their perfect day. My chest heaved, my vision darkened. For a moment, I thought I might faint. But then something inside me broke. Or maybe it woke. I stood, my knees trembling, my voice hoarse but steady. "If you don't want me there, then I won't come. But remember this, daughter. Weddings end, parties fade, guests leave, but a mother's love never dies. You can shut me out of your day, but you cannot erase the years I gave you. You cannot erase me." Her lips parted, as if to speak, but no words came. I turned to my husband. His face was wet with tears, his eyes hollow. Together we stood. The weight of betrayal pressed down on our shoulders, heavier than any burden we had carried before. And as we walked out that door, leaving behind the daughter we thought we knew, I made a silent vow. This would not end here. I would not crumble. I would not beg. If she had chosen to cut me out of her joy, then she would also lose the blessings, the sacrifices, the support I had poured into this wedding. Because sometimes walking away is the only dignity a mother has left. And as the door closed behind us, I swear I heard it, the faintest hitch in her breath, a crack in her resolve, a flicker of doubt. But it was too late. The words had been spoken, the bond had been broken, and nothing would ever be the same again. The hours after that night stretched on like years. My husband and I returned home in silence. We didn't speak, not because there was nothing to say, but because the words themselves felt too heavy, too dangerous. Every sentence sat on the edge of shattering us completely. When I finally broke the silence, it wasn't with anger. It was with a whisper. "Did you hear her? Truly hear her?" My husband didn't answer. He just sat in his old wooden chair, staring at the floor, as if the world had suddenly lost all color. I wanted to believe it had been a mistake, a bad dream, that she would call crying, saying she hadn't meant it. But as the night bled into morning, the silence of the phone proved crueler than any words. By noon, the whispers had started. Family has a way of carrying news faster than the wind. My sister-in-law called first. Her tone was clipped, almost rehearsed. "She's just nervous. Brides do strange things before weddings. Maybe you should give her space." Space. That's what they all said, as if my love were something suffocating, something poisonous that needed distance. But then came my brother. His words cut sharper. "Well, maybe she feels you've been too controlling. You know how young people are nowadays. They want freedom."
Freedom? I laughed bitterly after I hung up. Freedom from what? From a mother's presence? From the arms that once carried her through fevers, heartbreaks, storms? The division grew quickly. Some relatives sided with her, saying she must have her reasons. Others whispered behind closed doors that it was unforgivable, that a daughter cutting off her parents from her wedding was the gravest insult. And in the middle of it all, I felt alone.
I remembered her first day of school, the way her tiny fingers slipped from mine reluctantly, tears streaming down her face. "Don't go, Mama. Wait for me outside. I'll be brave if you're there." I remembered nights when she crawled into my bed during thunderstorms, trembling like a leaf until I wrapped her in my arms. "You always make me safe, Mama. Always." And now, that same girl, the one who once thought I was her whole world, had turned me into a stranger, someone unworthy of standing by her side on the most important day of her life. The contrast was unbearable. It was as if someone had taken my entire life's worth of love and erased it with a single sentence: "You're not invited." A few relatives came to visit, their words dripping with pity more than comfort. "She's young. She doesn't know what she's doing. Time will heal this. Maybe she'll regret it later." But every sentence felt like salt in a wound. Because what if she didn't regret it? What if this was who she had become? The cruelest moment came at a family gathering just a week later. My husband and I walked into the room only to be met with awkward silences and darting glances. No one said it outright, but the air was thick with judgment. One cousin finally whispered, "Maybe you should let it go. Don't make trouble for her. Weddings are supposed to be happy." Let it go. As if a mother could just shrug off being erased from her child's life. I felt my face burn, my chest tightened. I wanted to scream, to remind them all of the sacrifices, the nights I stayed awake with fevers, the years I went without new clothes so she could have books and uniforms. But I didn't scream. Instead, I walked away. My dignity was all I had left, and even that felt fragile. At home, my husband finally spoke, his voice low, broken. "I never thought it would be our own daughter who'd break us." I looked at him, at the man who had given everything to raise her, and my heart shattered anew, because I realized it wasn't just my bond with her that had been torn apart, it was his too. That night, I stood by the window, watching the streetlights blur through my tears. My mind replayed a memory, one I hadn't thought of in years. She was maybe 6 years old, standing on a chair in the kitchen trying to help me stir the soup. She spilled it everywhere, giggling, and looked up at me with those wide, innocent eyes. "One day, Mama, when I get married, you'll sit in the front, okay? Everyone will see you and know you're the best mama in the world." That memory gutted me, because the promise of a child had been replaced by the cruelty of an adult. And yet, despite the betrayal, despite the pain, one truth gnawed at me. I still loved her. I hated what she had done. I hated the humiliation, the whispers, the division it caused in our family. But my heart, foolish, stubborn heart, refused to stop loving her. That's the cruelest part of being a mother. You bleed, you break, you burn, and still you love. As the house settled into silence, I whispered into the darkness, not sure if I was speaking to God, to myself, or to the ghost of the daughter I once knew. "Maybe you can erase me from your wedding, my child, but you will never erase me from your heart. Someday that truth will find you." And with that thought, I finally closed my eyes. But sleep didn't come easy, because in my bones, I knew the fallout had only just begun. The days after her words were a blur of silence and whispers. My husband and I stayed home, each of us drowning in thoughts too heavy to voice aloud. But deep inside, I kept asking myself, why? Why would my daughter, the child I raised with every ounce of love, suddenly cast me aside like a stranger? It wasn't enough for me to believe she had simply changed. No, there had to be something more, a shadow lurking behind her words. And soon the cracks began to show. One evening, my niece, sweet, outspoken girl, came to visit. She hesitated as she sipped her tea, her eyes darting nervously toward the door, as if afraid someone might overhear. "Auntie," she whispered, "please don't think I'm interfering, but I overheard something at the wedding preparations."
My heart clenched. What did you hear, Beta? She lowered her voice. It wasn't her idea. It was his family. They told her you and Uncle shouldn't come, that you would embarrass them. The words pierced me like knives. Embarrass them? Us? Tears burned my eyes as I asked, but why? What have we done to deserve that? My niece looked away. They said you don't fit in, that you're too simple, too traditional. They want everything to look perfect for their guests, for their reputation, and they convinced her that inviting you would ruin that image. I sat frozen, my hands trembling around the teacup. So that was it. Not my daughter's heart, not her choice, but poison whispers planted in her mind, twisting her against us. The revelation left me both relieved and shattered. Relieved, because deep down I knew my daughter still had love buried somewhere inside her. Shattered, because she had chosen their voices over mine. That night, I replayed every moment of the last few months with new eyes. The way her fiancé's mother always smiled too tightly, her eyes scanning me up and down as though measuring and discarding me. The way his father once joked about how weddings are better without old traditions and unnecessary drama. The way they spoke over me whenever I tried to contribute to plans. At the time, I brushed it off. I thought, it doesn't matter. As long as she's happy, I can endure anything. But now I saw it clearly. Every slight, every dismissal, every cold glance, it had all been part of a larger plan. They didn't just want my daughter, they wanted to erase me from her life. And slowly, painfully, they succeeded. I remembered a day, just weeks before the disinvitation, when I tried to give her a necklace, an heirloom from my mother, something I had always dreamed of passing down to her on her wedding day. Her fiancé's mother had interrupted before my daughter could even take it. "Oh, that's nice," she said with a forced smile. "But we've already arranged something more suitable. She won't need that." The way my daughter looked at me then, conflicted, torn, should have been a warning. But I had pushed the thought away. Now, it returned like a knife twisting in my chest. I wanted to hate them. Truly, I did. The in-laws who had poisoned her mind, the man who stood silently as his family pushed us aside, the whispers that turned my child's heart cold. But in my anger, there was a deeper sadness, because at the end of the day, it wasn't just their voices that mattered, it was hers. She could have stood up for us. She could have said, "No, this is my family. My parents will be there." But she didn't. That choice was hers. And that was the wound that hurt most of all. I shared the truth with my husband that night. His jaw tightened, his eyes dark with fury. "So they see us as unworthy, as shame?" he muttered. "After everything we gave her? After everything we sacrificed?" He paced the room, fists clenched. I had never seen him so shaken. "They may have manipulated her, but she let them. She chose them over us." His words echoed in my heart. A painful truth I wanted to deny but couldn't. In the days that followed, the family division deepened. Relatives began to take sides not just over her decision, but over the revelation of her in-laws' cruelty. Some whispered that my daughter had been brainwashed, that she was a victim herself. Others said no amount of manipulation excused what she did. And me? I stood in the middle, torn between anger at the villains who pulled the strings and heartbreak at the daughter who let herself be pulled. One evening, as I sat alone in her empty room, I picked up an old photo album. There she was, 5 years old, smiling with cake smeared on her face. 10 years old, holding my hand as we walked through the bazaar. 15, crying into my lap after her first heartbreak. I ran my fingers over those pictures, my tears falling onto the worn pages. How could the same girl who once told me, "Mama, you're my best friend in the world," now see me as a burden?
And yet, as I closed the album, one thought refused to leave me. Maybe, just maybe, she didn't truly believe I was unworthy. Maybe she was just too afraid, too weak to stand against the voices around her. But weakness cuts just as deep as cruelty. And in that weakness, I had lost my place in her life. As I sat in the darkness, I whispered a vow into the silence. I may have lost your wedding, my child, but I will not lose myself. And one day, the truth you've hidden behind their lies will rise. And when it does, you will remember who I am. The morning after the truth settled in my bones, I woke up with swollen eyes but a steadier heart. For nights I had cried myself into exhaustion, asking the same question over and over. Why would she do this to me? But now the tears had dried. My heart was no less broken, but something new had risen in its place. A fire. I stood before the mirror, staring at the woman reflected there. Wrinkles lined my face, silver threaded through my hair. But behind my tired eyes, I saw strength. The kind of strength forged through decades of sacrifice, endurance, and unconditional love. For too long, I had begged for her affection. For too long, I had held on to the memory of a little girl, forgetting that the woman she had become was not the same child. And so I whispered to my reflection, no more tears, no more begging. If she wants me gone, then gone I shall be. But she will feel the emptiness of my absence in ways she cannot imagine. The wedding had not been built on her fiancé's family's wealth alone. No, it carried my sweat, my savings, my prayers. The venue, booked with my money. The caterers, paid with the funds I had scraped together over years of living modestly. The bridal gifts, bought with love, carefully wrapped by my hands. I remembered pawning my gold bangles, my mother's bangles, just so I could help cover the deposit for the banquet hall. The thought had pained me, but I had smiled. For my daughter, I had told myself, for her happiness. Now, every sacrifice mocked me. I sat at the dining table with my husband, who looked as though he had aged a decade in mere days. His eyes were hollow, his back bent with a weight no man should carry. Enough, I told him firmly. He looked at me startled. What do you mean? I mean, we will not weep any longer. We will not crawl to them. We will not give them the satisfaction of seeing us broken. This house has survived storms before, and it will survive this one too. That very afternoon, I made the first call. Hello, this is Mrs. Khan. Yes, the booking under my daughter's name.
I'm the one who made the down payment. I'm canceling it, effective immediately." The man sputtered in protest, asking if I was sure, warning me about penalties. "Keep your penalties," I said coolly. "Just cancel it." One by one, I went through the list. The caterer, the florist, the decorator. Each time my voice grew steadier, stronger. By evening, the grand wedding my daughter's in-laws had been boasting about had crumbled piece by piece into nothing, and I felt no regret. If they thought I could erase me, they would now learn that nothing they had planned stood without me. When the news spread, the phone calls began again. This time the voices were sharper, angrier. "How could you do this?" one aunt hissed. "Do you want to ruin your daughter's future?" "Think of her reputation," another scolded. But I didn't flinch. For once their opinions rolled off me like rain on stone. "Where were you all," I asked quietly, "when she erased me from her life, when she humiliated us? Did you defend me then? No. You chose silence. Now you will learn that silence has consequences." The line went quiet. It wasn't long before she herself came storming into our house, my daughter, my flesh and blood.
Her eyes blazed with anger, her cheeks flushed. "Mama, how could you do?" she demanded. "How could you cancel everything? Do you know what you've done?" I stood, meeting her fury with calm dignity. I did only what was mine to do. That wedding was built on my money, my effort, my love. And when you cut me out of your life, you cut yourself off from all of it. Her voice trembled, caught between anger and disbelief. "You've embarrassed me. Everyone will talk." "Let them," I said firmly. "Let them see the truth. A daughter who shunned her parents for strangers, and a mother who refused to be erased." Her eyes darted, as if searching for words that would wound me. But I did not let her speak first. "Do you know what real embarrassment is, child? Not losing a wedding venue, not facing whispers at a party. Embarrassment is standing in a room and hearing your daughter say, 'You're not invited.' Embarrassment is realizing that the child you carried, raised, and sacrificed for now sees you as disposable." Her lips parted, but no words came out. Her father, who had been silent until now, finally spoke, his voice low but steady. "You broke us, daughter, and yet we still stood by you. But we will not bow, not anymore." For the first time since that fateful night, I saw doubt flicker in her eyes, a crack in her defiance. She left soon after, slamming the door behind her, but the echo of her footsteps didn't rattle me anymore. I turned to my husband and took his hand. "We may have lost a daughter today, but we have not lost ourselves. That is what matters." For the first time in weeks, he smiled faintly, a glimmer of pride breaking through his sorrow. I knew the days ahead would not be easy. The relatives would gossip, the in-laws would fume, my daughter might hate me for a long time. But I also knew this. One day, when the glitter of her in-laws' approval fades, when the weight of her choices presses down on her, she will remember. She will remember the mother who stood tall, who refused to be broken, who walked away with her dignity intact. And maybe then, she will understand. That night, I sat by the window again, but this time I did not weep. I looked up at the stars, feeling their cold light on my face, and whispered into the silence, "I may not sit at your wedding, my child, but I will sit in truth. And the truth is, I am your mother. Nothing you or anyone else does can erase that. You may cast me aside, but you will never erase my love or my strength." And with that vow, I closed my eyes, not as a broken woman, but as a mother who had finally found her voice. Weeks passed.
The storm of whispers, accusations, and gossip eventually settled into a dull murmur. Relatives had said their piece, neighbors had raised their eyebrows, and the world moved on, as it always does. But inside me, something permanent had shifted. I was not the same woman who had once sat at her dining table waiting for her daughter to smile at her. I was not the same mother who had begged for scraps of affection or waited endlessly for one phone call, one apology, one sign that I still mattered. That woman had died the day my daughter looked me in the eyes and told me I was not welcome at her wedding. What rose from those ashes was someone quieter, stronger, and unexpectedly free. In the first days after the disinvitation, my heart felt heavy, as though every breath dragged chains with it. I could barely walk from room to room without stumbling into a memory. Her childhood photos lined the walls, her gap-toothed grin, her school uniform, the picture of us cutting her first birthday cake with my hands wrapped around hers. Each one pierced me with the same question: where had I gone wrong? I traced her face with trembling fingers, sometimes talking to the photographs as if she could hear me. "I gave you everything," I whispered to the silent smiles frozen in glass. Why wasn't it enough? But as days turned into weeks, the ache softened. It did not disappear. I don't think such wounds ever vanish, but it dulled, like an old scar. And in that dullness, something else quietly grew. A strange clarity. I began to realize I had spent so many years defining myself only as a mother that I had forgotten I was also a woman, a human being with needs, desires, and dignity. I stopped waiting for her to call. The phone, once a source of torment, sat untouched on the side table. No longer did I stare at it, hoping it might ring. No longer did I jump at every vibration, praying it was her voice on the other end. I understood finally that her silence was not my punishment. It was her choice, and I had the right to choose too. I chose not to waste the rest of my years begging for crumbs of love where respect no longer lived. So, I began to live, truly live. I joined a local women's group at the community center, which I would never have allowed myself before, when my entire identity revolved around home and family. The first day, I felt nervous, my sari plain compared to the bright shawls around me, my voice small as I introduced myself. But then someone laughed and another woman smiled at me, and suddenly I felt seen, not as somebody's mother, not as a woman cast aside, but as myself. We shared stories, we cooked meals together, we played carom boards, and sometimes laughed so hard our stomachs hurt. I found friends who looked into my eyes and didn't measure me by how much I gave or sacrificed. They valued me simply for existing. That was a gift I hadn't realized I had been starving for.
I rediscovered little joys that had long been buried under sacrifice. I began baking again, filling my home with the warm, yeasty smell of fresh bread. I stood on my balcony in the evenings, letting the cool wind brush against my face as the sun dipped behind the rooftops. I listened to the music of birds at dawn, their songs crisp and hopeful, and felt my chest rise with something close to gratitude. I even bought myself a new shawl, a soft pink one, though I hesitated at first. "You've earned this," my husband said when I showed it to him shyly. And for the first time in years, I believed him. For the first time, I felt free. Free from waiting, free from begging, free from the endless, invisible chains of expectation. Meanwhile, word reached me of her wedding. They went through with it, of course, though on a smaller scale, stripped of the grandeur I had once envisioned. I heard from cousins, neighbors, even strangers who had attended. Guests noticed the absence of her parents. Whispers circled through the crowd like smoke that refuses to disperse. What kind of daughter leaves her mother out? How will this marriage survive without blessings? No wedding is complete without a mother's presence. The words traveled, carried on curious tongues, and though I did not seek them, I heard them all. I wasn't there to see it, but I was told her smile faltered more than once, that in the middle of laughter, her eyes would dart toward the entrance, scanning the door as if expecting us to appear. That when the rituals began, her hands trembled, and she swallowed hard, perhaps realizing that no matter how much she tried to bury us, something vital was missing. They said she looked radiant, yes, but that the radiance dimmed under the weight of absence. They said her in-laws whispered behind their hands, uneasy at the shadow over the day. They said a bride without her parents is a tree cut from its roots, still standing for now, but trembling in the wind. That was her consequence. Not punishment from me, not revenge. I sought neither. It was simply the natural weight of her choices, the heavy silence of knowing she had cut out the very roots that had nourished her. As for me, my consequence was peace, a peace I had never known before, the peace of knowing I had walked away with my dignity intact, that I had not begged, not bowed, not broken, that I had stood as a mother, yes, but also as a woman who valued her own self-worth. One evening, weeks later, I sat by the window with my husband. The twilight wrapped the world in shades of gold and gray, and the kettle whistled softly on the stove. He looked at me with quiet admiration, eyes softer than I had seen in years. "You are stronger than I ever knew," he said gently. I smiled faintly, my hands folded in my lap. I had to be, for us, for myself. He reached for my hand, calloused from years of work, and for the first time in a long time, I felt the warmth of partnership, not just of shared struggle, but of shared survival. Together, we had endured storms. Together, we would endure this too. And in that moment, as the evening breeze curled through the curtains, I realized something simple but profound. Motherhood is not slavery. Love is not measured by how much pain you endure in silence. Respect is the foundation of family, and without it, even love cannot survive. That realization was both bitter and liberating. Bitter because it meant accepting that the bond I thought unbreakable had been broken not by my failures, but by her choices. Liberating because it meant I no longer had to carry the unbearable weight of blame. So to those listening, to the daughters and sons, the mothers and fathers, I want to say this. Do not take your parents for granted. Their love is vast, but it is not infinite. They may endure your indifference, your sharp words, your neglect, but every wound leaves a scar. And when you dishonor them, when you cast them aside, you carve wounds that may never heal, not in their hearts, but in your own soul. Because no one replaces a parent. No one fills that silence once it is created. And to the parents, to those like me who have given and given until nothing was left, I say this: never forget your worth. You are not defined by the roles others assign you. You are not just a mother, just a father, just someone's caretaker. You are human, deserving of respect, dignity, and peace. Do not shrink yourself to fit the boxes others place in you. Do not beg for love that demands your humiliation as its price. My daughter may have chosen her path without me, but I chose mine with strength. I chose to rise, to heal, to breathe again, and though our roads no longer meet, I walk mine with my head held high. Because in the end, I am more than a mother discarded. I am a woman reborn. I am proof that even in the deepest heartbreak, one can find renewal. Sometimes, when the night is quiet and memories press against my chest, I still ache for her. I still wish things had been different. I still imagine an alternate world where she stood beside me, hand in hand, as we faced her new life together. But then I remind myself that love cannot survive where respect does not live, and I release the ache into the silence. So, if you remember nothing else from my story, remember this. Never beg for love where respect does not live. Choose dignity, choose self-worth, and you will always find peace, even in the face of heartbreak.